Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today I'm looking at a book which has come to us for review from 11 International Publishing based in The Hague. The title of the book is called The Contours of International Prosecutions, and it's been written by Eleanor Fry. Do have a look at our review, which is on the web and in the journals. And before I actually go into the review, let me show you the book itself. Here it is, a paperback, and it's got a subtitle, As Defined by Facts, Charges and Jurisdiction. So it's The Contours of International Prosecution, and then that subtitle. There's the front page, the actual front. That's the spine. Then on the back there's a little bit of information about the book, then some information about Eleanor. It's a light book. It runs to about just under 200 pages. It's got a slightly different structure at the back with an index of some sort, which is more to do with the bibliography itself, because it doesn't actually have what you call a formal index concerning page numbers or anything like that, but it does actually give you all the source information. Now at the front of the book, we'll have a look. There's the front page there. There's the actual blurb. There's a nice dedication, which I will just show you there. I always like to show the dedications. And then there's an acknowledgement about the doctoral research that Eleanor conducted. This is the more detailed table of contents. And then basically there are 7 chapters, with a conclusion, of course, in chapter 7. 2 appendices and a bibliography. There are some cases mentioned. They're all international by nature, of course, because of the content of the book. After that, you've got a table of what are called instruments. And again, these are effectively international hybrid military courts and tribunals, the various charters and so forth, again, to justify things. Then frequently abbreviated sources, in other words, abbreviations. Very helpful in this area of international work, because there are obviously a lot of abbreviations, and it's quite easy to forget what they are. So you've got that as an aide-memoire. Then you go straight into the body copy, and you see there are paragraph numbering on the left-hand side as you're looking at it. There are obviously footnotes, which are detailed. You can see that all the way through. Just opening it in the middle again, paragraph numbering and footnotes. And then at the back, you've got the actual main bibliography itself. So that is the book. Now, what's it about? Because when we saw the personal information about this book, we thought it was an interesting one from a number of different points of view. So Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and the title we've given the review is War Crimes and Genocide, a close analysis of the problems of prosecution. And I think it's fair to say, even now, notwithstanding the main precedent in modern times, which is Nuremberg, that we are still in very early days dealing with the appalling behaviour of so many people who run so many countries on this planet very, very badly and kill a lot of people. They're not brought to justice, and of course that should be the logical role of the UN. But of course there's so much internal division that they do not get onto these important matters, because they're internally squabbling with each other all the time. Now that really is the biggest problem, but in reality, let's look at the practice of it and see where we go, because the title is The Contours of International Prosecution, and certainly I am convinced, and I'm sure many others are, that there is a future for international prosecutions, because if people like President Assad of Syria realise what's going to happen to them, they may possibly tone down their appalling behaviour. I know it's an ideal, but it is there as a threat, which is always, of course, a concept, a basic principle, certainly of our common law as it approaches the criminal jurisdiction. Anyway, enough of that basic lecturing. The review is on the web and in the journals, and this is what we say. It's a new book from 11 International Publishing, which deals in a precise and systematic manner with the legal difficulties inherent in prosecuting those who are accused of perpetrating international crimes. And as war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide fit into this category. The problems involved in launching and sustaining a successful prosecution are of course legion. And the core difficulties, which I would highlight here, in prosecuting the perpetrators of such crimes of outrage are their sheer magnitude and scope. And as the author Eleanor Fry points out, these crimes are committed on a massive scale normally across huge geographical areas, usually over lengthy time periods, against large numbers of people by large numbers of perpetrators. You can forget it being one person, it's quite often a large proportion of a state or a tribe within a state, or whatever you want to call them, whatever words you want to use for it. It's that block of people who wish to basically kill everybody else. And it's an animal behaviour, frankly, but it's something we should be aiming to supervise. Now, these characteristics alone render an international crime as markedly different from, for instance, an ordinary domestic crime, and because it's the sheer scale. There's a quote here: "International crimes have blurry boundaries," says Fry, and she's a Netherlands-based scholar who, amongst her lengthy array of academic credentials, has held visiting positions at Tulane University in the United States of America and the extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia and the International Criminal Court. So she comes to us with a pedigree. The complexity and scale of international crime, she says, create, for example, demarcation problems which impact on such issues as jurisdiction and the procurement of and admissibility of evidence. Complications such as these will obviously present difficult questions for the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and the jurisdictional reach of which is discussed in detail in part 3 of her work. Again, that's valuable for anybody who's new to this, either as a lawyer or someone studying international relations. Now, in considering these and a host of related issues, this study, with its purely legal perspective, focuses on the law and its interpretation in practice, concentrating in particular on those international criminal courts that were founded for the purpose of dealing with core international crimes. While this includes contemporary courts, a necessary historical perspective is evident, as I've referred to earlier, of course, in the references to Nuremberg and the Tokyo tribunals, and those are just only 2 examples. And with the virtually intractable problems created in particular by the conflict in the Middle East and the atrocities committed by ISIS, amongst others, and of course there are other participants, the publication of this carefully researched study, I think, is both valuable and timely. She goes on to say, prosecuting international crimes globally, she concludes, is not a task for one court or tribunal to take on alone. Large-scale collective violence demands a comprehensive collective response. Absolutely right. That's where the problem is, of course. Those carrying out further inquiries into this vital area of research, we think, will welcome this book because it's a thorough approach. It has extensive bibliographical information and a useful table of cases and instruments at the front. And of course, I think it's an excellent research resource, and we thank 11 Publishing very much for producing it. The publication date is cited at August 2015. Let's just have a quick look at it again. There's the front, the spine there, which you can read, and then at the back you can see the detail. Now, in addition to that, you've got, if you open it, international crimes and case demarcation. Again, that's another important area. The contemporary ad hoc and hybrid institutions, for instance, is looked at in some detail. So what Eleanor has done is she's gone into a lot of detail as to what is required. This is an interesting chapter on show trials and sham prosecutions. And of course, the classic problem that you do have is an allegation that this is all, that, you know, that the whole concept of the prosecution is grounded in something which is not acceptable because it's a fake of some sort. Absolute nonsense in most cases, because that is the first refuge of the scoundrel when it comes to defence. And it should not be allowed, but unfortunately many people get away with it, alas. But I do hope that this book will contribute to us looking at this matter on a much more sensible basis once we get through this nonsense of the European Union referendum and we recognise where our place in Europe is as Britain, and also our place within the world, because this is something where you've got to bring the countries together to stop people who go around committing mass murder on a horrific scale. Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you to everybody involved in this publication. It's a very useful one for the future. Bye-bye.